Hi everyone, and thanks again for joining us on the channel. Today we're at the Nook in Warsash in Hampshire, and Regan is going to ask us some questions about life after death. Come and join us.
Kristy?
Yeah, so Regan's coming up for 18. So when I very first came to your circle for the first time, I found out in that circle, unbeknown to me at the time I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Regan.
So you were told that in the circle?
Yes,
the circle's
so
like a psychic circle,
so,
like where we would
teach so on and off over the years we've had lots of other adventures together, but most recently it'd be Regan that is pulling us back together
again.
It's
interesting because we did all the BBC together, didn't we?
Yes.
And we did all that stuff, the circles, for God knows how long back that was. So you got interested in this too then, Regan, in a way?
Yeah, I've always seen my mum doing it. She'd read tarot cards and I'd be like, oh, what's that? I want to know what that is.
Yeah.
So I decided to do my project.
So what's the project then? Tell us what this project is.
Well, the question is there evidence to prove that there is life after death? And I have the summer to research into it all I want, and then I'll write a dissertation about it.
Okay, so you've done a bit of research already, or spoken to anyone?
Yes, I've got a lot of books in my room at the moment on
some of mine, I hope.
Near-death experiences. Actually, I think, we should have figures in my room.
Yeah, so propping up the table.
Yeah. So I have near-death experiences, what different religions say about it.
Yeah.
And I'll just look at the evidence, analyse it, and then write about it.
So this is the first time you've interviewed a couple of mediums then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is when she went, Mum,
can
you get Craig and Jane for me?
She's always mentioned you, so I was like...
Yeah, and it's great, isn't it? Because it sort of brings back a connection after all those years. So it's really... So, okay, let's have some of your questions then.
Yeah.
I mean, Jane can perhaps do the first one if you like, Jane.
Yeah, okay. How did you start out as a medium?
Well, I was really born like I am. And all I wanted to do was nursing, and I used to end up in the nurse's staff room because I used to see people from the other side. And I can remember my grandmother, and I'm going back when I was quite young, about 13 I suppose, I saw someone standing at the top of the stairs, and it was in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform. And I happened to say to my grandmother, I didn't know you had a visitor, and described her. She said, that's my sister that got killed in the war, it's a matron. And she said, you mustn't tell people that you see and that people from the other side because they think you've got religious hallucinations. That's enough to frighten you. And it progressed from there. And I used to see auras and things around people and that. And it was very normal to us, one could say. And I never really wanted it, to be honest with you. I just wanted to be a nurse. And then as time progressed, I trained to be a nurse. And then I used to sit by people's beds before they passed, and you see people come for them. So it's quite normal, but once again, you must always go by evidential proof and personal experience, in my view.
I'd be also interested. Where did you start, Kristy?
Mine was, bizarrely, I had just Regan's two older sisters, and I had a lot of spiritual activity going on around me. And so you're looking 20 years ago when it wasn't as commonly spoken of. Now, I couldn't convince any of my friends to come to circle with me because it was considered weird.
Yeah.
And so in my house, where toys would be going off, lights would be going on, objects would be missing, my house became known as quite an unfamiliar place to be. I couldn't get a babysitter easily because you think the children were running around. You'd go upstairs and they're all asleep in bed. And I remember specifically hearing a little girl ask for a kiss goodnight and it wasn't my own children. And I thought, I'm going mad. This is crazy. I'm really questioning my own sanity. And I, at the time, used to get the psychic fairs
Yeah.
It used to pop up, and the psychic news.
Yeah.
Long before internet.
All right for that.
I know. And I'd gone along to one of the psychic fairs, and bizarrely, a lady stopped me, just handed me the psychic news, and said, "There's a circle in there. Get yourself off to it."
Yeah.
And
it's
I
funny how it goes, isn't it? Because, like, for me, it was the same. It was like synchronicities and coincidences that brings it. You have it as a child. I mean, could see my granddad in the room when he died, and I knew that I was saying, "Granddad's in my room," and they hadn't told me at 6 years old that Granddad had died, you know, and I was seeing his spirit in my room. I used to scare my mum with it, you know. And for me, I suppose my development came when I met Doris Stokes, who told me all about meeting Jane and things like that, which I've sort of explained in some of the videos on YouTube. But and then I met a policeman who said, I had a reading with him, and he said, "You're going to be a medium. You've been told this already." And Doris Stokes had already said, "You're going to be a medium." So within a week, I was finding myself sat in a circle. It was like I was sucked into it, really, you know. So don't you think it's kind of like, it kind of happens, you get chosen. It's not something you want to do, is it? I mean, I resisted it for years. I didn't want to be a medium. I was running an advertising agency. I don't want to do all this nonsense.
Well, I wasn't going to go along when I first came to your circle. And again, another coincidence, because the very first psychic book I'd bought was your first psychic book you'd written, the Psychic Workbook.
Oh, right, yeah.
Again, I didn't know you at the time, didn't know this, so I bought that before I'd even met you. And I'd looked in this psychic news, seen there was this circle running in Eastleigh, and I couldn't get anyone to go with me. And I've gone to my friend's house for the day going, "Don't think I'm going to go." And she had This Morning on in the background. And there's 3 mediums on there on This Morning with Dr. Raj
Patel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these 3 mediums trying to prove psychic ability.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's really interesting. Actually, I am going to go because that's interested me. And then I went along that evening, and it was you that had been on the telly as well in the daytime.
Oh, they were real hard on us too on that programme, I remember. So does that answer your question? You got some info from your mum there too? Yeah?
Well, I almost forget. Because
Yeah.
So the next question, how do people react when you tell them you're a medium?
Well, nowadays it's not so bad. I mean, it's cool to be a medium nowadays. But like Kristy said earlier on, in the early days, I didn't tell anyone I was a medium. I mean, I was working within spiritualism, and I used to go, we're based in Southampton, of course, but I used to go all the way to London to do the London Spiritualist Church, so no one near me would find out I'm a medium, because I was at that time running an advertising business, and if they thought I was a medium, you know, you might lose the work, you know, particularly if they were Christians or something, because Christians used to be very anti it. And so people react now kind of intrigued. But I think people in the past in fact, it was only in 1952 or something like that, somewhere around that time, that it became legal to be a medium at all. It was part of the Witchcraft Act. We weren't allowed to be mediums, you know. Of course, I wanted to be a medium at 1 year old.
Helen Duncan.
And Helen Duncan and things, there was all the battles with it. So you could be arrested. Helen Duncan, my Jen said, was arrested, you know, tried for being a medium, you know. So there's all sorts of things. So, but now it's completely different. But also, it's fantastic that we can now express ourselves and say we're mediums. But also, every Tom, Dick, and Harry's a medium now. You know, everybody's a bleeding medium. So where do you? You know, where do you go with that? You know, so it's a shame in that respect, because it's not as valued as it was, and it's not as unusual as it was. But so people's reaction has changed. I think it's for the better. At least it's out there. At least we can talk about it like this. You know.
Yeah. Do your abilities change everyday activities for you?
It depends. Sometimes we might be cooking in the kitchen or washing up the Marigold's glass, and then we get a phone call. Can we fly to Los Angeles and give Julia Roberts' brother a reading? And then we'll say, we'll think about it and see what the spirit world says. And it just happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know about you, Kristy, but I will switch it off when I'm not working. I'm either in mediumistic mode or I'm
food mode.
I'm food mode. Yeah, or nag mode. You know?
Nag mode. I think the other way around.
So, yeah, but when I find if I'm going to do mediumistic work, I have to get myself into the zone. So I'm not the sort of person that will, if you're queuing up in this queue and you see round someone and say, oh, your father in spirit, I don't. I only switch it on when I'm going to do it.
We're quite normal people. It's just that I believe the spirit will make the appointments for us to certain people to see, and the rest follows up, because you know somebody's in need. And it's quite draining for us sometimes, because we're very much in the material world. So to connect to the two worlds can be very unusual at times. But you have to have your feet firmly on the ground with this, to know what's reality and what isn't reality. Because there's a lot of crazy people out there with this.
So what's your next question then?
How did you first start believing in life after death, and what validated these beliefs for you?
I think, like I said, I had an experience when I was young as a child, but I didn't really understand what that was all about, really. For me, I think really it was when I met Doris Stokes. She was a very famous medium. She's not so well known now by the younger generation. Yeah. But I mean, she was a fantastic medium, and she suddenly sort of burst upon the Australian stage, particularly, and then got known in her own country here in England. Didn't get so well known in America. But I had a reading with her because my sister's husband had died, and I went with my sister along to it, hoping that it's not going to be Doris Oakes, rather than Stokes. And it blew my mind. I mean, she told me things about my life and about my grandparents on the spirit side and things, gave their names and gave my brother's name and his wife's name and gave my nan's name and everything.
Have your beliefs changed over the years?
Yes, mine have. In fact, I don't like to think I've got beliefs at all, actually. I like to think that my experience is my beliefs, and I think that's important. I don't think we should have beliefs. I think we come into some spiritual quest and we already believe that it's Jesus, or we already believe it's Buddha. We've stymied ourselves to begin with. So, but certainly my understanding of things has changed a lot. I mean, I was much more, my mediumship developed, but actually my first interest was through all the hippie era and everything like that. That's where I got all my interest in consciousness and things. But then I went into spiritualism, which was going from a psychedelic world into a sort of very world of jumble sale mentality. Tea cozy brigade sort of thing. And then from that, I've also got, as you probably know in the books, I've got very interested in India. And took the quest into India and started experimenting with oracles and things like that, and research which looks into the ancient lives of the past and past lives, which is not in the spiritualist beliefs, and also talks about life on other planets, which is also not in any of the earlier teachings of spiritualism. And it also talks about development of consciousness and your destiny and karma and things, which has kind of moved away from the life after death theme that we're talking about. But it's kind of also integrated into this whole idea that, what goes into the next life? What is our consciousness that survives? Who is this personality that goes into the next world? So definitely changed a lot. Yeah. I don't know about you, Jane. Have your views changed over the years?
I think it's always good to have an open mind and things. I'd say more spiritual than any belief system, and I feel you've got to go by personal experience, because I'm very into Sharavana Baba, who is a holy guru, and it's just nice to be with somebody that's quite relaxing to be with and go meditation and that. So I don't believe in any particular religion. I think there's only one religion, as far as I'm concerned, religion of love.
So I suppose life after death is part of it, but there's more to it than just life after death. I think that's where we're coming from. It's all also about becoming a conscious, aware being, becoming enlightened ultimately.
Yeah. What was the main piece of evidence that you felt helped you believe in life after death, or what experiences led you to believe in it?
I don't know. It's hard to say one particular piece of evidence. I don't think you get a number of things where you think, how did that? I mean, I was thrown straight into Doris Stokes, right? So how did she know my brother's name? How did she know my sister's name? How did she know my brother's wife's name? How did she know my nan's name? How did she know I did that as a child and things like this? And then you come away after and think, well, she could have looked it up or done something. How did she know that? So you don't immediately get convinced, although that was mind-blowing. And then I think I was personally convinced by another medium who used a very famous medium called Gordon Higginson, and just watching the man work, knowing that he didn't know anybody in the audience, and giving names and addresses and giving first names and surnames and telling people to take the purse out of their bag and just count the money in there. I remember him saying to her, and she added it all up. And he says, it's 19 and 11 pence you got in there. And she added up, I've got 19 and 11, you're right, you know. And I think, how did he know all these type of things, you know? So the evidence, I think the evidence and proof comes gradually. I don't think it's not like, that's it. It kind of gets, a point comes when you think it's clinched. I believe this, you know. You know, even your own work you don't believe sometimes. You know, how did I know that? Is there something that I've heard of already or something? You know, you don't always can't even believe where you get it from. You know, it's such a remarkable thing.
Assuming there is an afterlife, is there a good place and a bad place?
Well, you can have a bad place here, can't you? And that you don't have to wait to go to the afterlife, which meant this could be hell living here. But we hope that, you know, that when our spirit goes on, it goes to a good place, and we are given proof from people on the other side connecting with us. Sometimes it can take years before a loved one comes through. How many people have I had say, can you connect with Elvis Presley or Michael Jackson? Well, I can't, can I? Because they're not queuing up to see me. It depends the person that's in front of you, who they want. You must always go on evidential proof, a person's name, how they passed, anniversary dates, and things that's actually happened in the physical world rather than the spiritual world. And I think that's what you've got to go on, 100%.
I don't believe there's like a hell, put it that way. But like attracts like in all the worlds, isn't it? So, you know, some places on earth, like Jane says, could be like a hell. You know, for me, perhaps being down the pub with a load of loud people might be a sort of hell. For others, it might be a sort of heaven. But you kind of attract each other, don't you? So, and I think when we go into the spirit world, we take with us our illusions of this world as well. So if we've been working the stock exchange all our life, we'll probably come to some spiritual stock exchange and still be working on that, you know. So we go into a familiar world like this one, and for some, I suppose hell, or if there's such a thing as hell, is separation from the light, as it were. So it's ignorance is what I would call hell. There's only ignorance.
Or an organised religion like the Catholics, because it's good for business.
Yeah. So I think hell's a bit of propaganda, really. That perhaps there are demonic worlds where there are unevolved spirits. But I think once we get into the human level of consciousness, because I believe we go through many lives to get to human state, and there may be demonic worlds, but we don't go back. If we slip back, we don't slip back far. We don't go slip back right into some insect life. We've developed our consciousness. Even if we've been bad people, we have our consciousness. So we still have opportunities to progress, even the worst of us. So, you know, we can slip back a bit, but not far. But we're always, the graph is always going up eventually, you know.
Thank you. For you to be able to contact people in the afterlife, do you have to be in a certain mindset or environment?
Well, you have to be in very much a meditative state. And then what I do, I always send my thoughts up my consciousness for somebody to come through. And I always say, if you don't come through, you lot, I'm never working for you again. And I truly mean it.
So you threaten them, basically.
I do. And if people say evil spirits, they won't come through to me because they daren't. You know, I'm quite bossy by nature. But no, it's getting yourself ready, and it's like surrendering yourself to a higher realm. And you see pictures, you hear things, you sense things, and that person in front of you, and then you give what you feel. So it's a natural process for me.
You definitely have to get yourself in the zone, as it were. I think all mediums have to get themselves in the zone. Otherwise you'd be burnt out. So for me, I do meditation. I mean, I do a very deep meditation before. I can't do the mediumship until I tune in. If I'm doing readings for people on the telephone, for example, I have to spend half an hour before I do that reading, getting myself linked in and tuned in and in connecting with spirit. Because my brain, when I'm doing mediumship, I'm sure other mediums will say the same, is in a completely different frame set. I couldn't do mathematics. I couldn't work out, because I couldn't work out the bill for something, for example. Well, it's like I'm in a different kind of thinking process, which is kind of more holistic as opposed to rational. So I get into this malleable state of mind. And I think we all do. I think mediums are all different. So there's no set answer to
We all
that.
work different. Well, I tend to do my advanced mediumship, so I'm tuning in the night before. And then when that person's ready, because I'm quite busy in my life, then I can connect with that person. So we work all differently.
Your YouTube channel, you post prediction videos. How do you get these predictions, and how accurate do you find that they are?
But it's up to others to say how accurate they are. They do seem to be pretty accurate because a lot of things come true. It's difficult to say how the predictions come, really, because I really go into a meditation beforehand. And although I feel sometimes it's coming from the spirit world, I feel it kind of comes from connecting with what I think is like the universal mind. That's how I feel it. I feel like everything is there in potential. And if you can connect onto that, you kind of get a glimpse of what the likely potential is of what's going to happen. So so I think when you make a prediction, what I think you're doing is you're seeing the map, as it were, but we as individuals can travel over that because we have a certain amount of free will to make the decision how we move across that map. So with events that are like for the world, the choices are kind of collective about how we move across it. So it comes, I just sit in a deep meditation and with a booklet next to me, and then I just hastily scribble it all down without trying to censor my thoughts. That's the important thing, because if I've got any preconceptions, it's hard. So the less I know about a topic, the better. And James done lots of predictions too, because we used to do the Big Breakfast, didn't we?
Tomorrow's news today, so I just sit in and then send a prayer and a thought up, and then I suddenly see world events and things, and it would happen as I saw it, and they had a scoreboard, what was right and wrong.
So I suppose the Big Breakfast was before your time, wasn't it?
No, but I actually looked at it on your YouTube
Oh yeah,
channel.
because it was Paulie Yates who used to, Paulie Yates, she was married to Bob Geldof, and so we used to sit with her, and she was a real mean cookie with us, wasn't she? Because if you're going to get it wrong, she's ready.
Well, she wasn't too
But
bad.
she was great, actually. She was a
She wasn't too
fantastic
bad.
I like we got on well with her. But so every week we'd have to do next week's news today.
And in those days, you had a fax machine, so you had to put your predictions through the night before, and it had to be checked by a lawyer just in case you were libelous. So it's quite a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Then we used to have to go to bed at 11 o'clock at night because they kept on faxing us backwards and forwards, and we had to be up at 3 in the morning, so we had a few hours sleep to go and get the 4 o'clock train. And we wouldn't get home until about 1 o'clock the next day, so it's quite a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah, that was all done live too, you know. So anyway, that's fascinating. So that got us into the idea of doing predictions. But it's not really, in the past I would have said, it's not really our main part of our work because we're mediums. It's a very different thing.
Have you ever predicted anything big, like
Oh,
terrorist
yes.
attacks? Or
Yeah, I mean, I went all over the news. It went viral on the internet because I predicted that, first of all, I predicted that Trump would stand for being president, which he did, and then became president. And I predicted the terror attacks that were happening in Nice, and before they happened, and that came where I said it did. And then all the predictions about Boris Johnson will be prime minister, which is way back, when I said May will fall and Boris Johnson. So there's lots of these things, and we get some wrong too, I mean, we don't get it all right, but the percentage I think we get right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember that one on the Big Breakfast. You said about the boy impaled on railings.
Yeah, and
it happened next day.
And I also said when Princess
page
Anne
news.
would get married, and the venue for any journalist or anybody. And I said she would get married in Scotland in a little church to Timothy Lawrence, and that happened. So it was quite big.
So we both got tuned in.
Yeah.
So the Big Breakfast got us into this, really, in a way, kind of forced us into this prediction thing, because the newspapers always like these ideas of what's going to happen, because it's next week's news today, isn't it?
Yeah, and cults, when do you remember the Wacko cult
Oh
thing?
yes, people forget
I predicted
that.
that
yeah.
I saw fire and I saw it being blown up
Waco.
inside, and that happened.
So we're getting it from America as well as here, and I remember.
But we're not living and breathing predictions.
No.
It's just when we're nice and calm, you get these feelings.
Yeah.
But there's nothing you can do to stop world events.
And again, it's you've got to get yourself in the zone. Again, it's a sort of different zone in a way to mediumship, but it's sort of, you kind of have to align your spirit with something bigger than yourself.
I wish I could get him in the zone to do things.
Into the ironing zone.
A bit more than that, gardening and everything.
Would you consider it a burden if you saw something or predicted something that was bad?
No, because it's a natural process, because you can't switch your mind off, can you? If you see something and you can't stop events. It's part of nature who we are.
I also think when I looked at the Nadi oracles in India, they would predict your future, for example, but they'd also give you a remedy to help you make that future better, to get the negative down and prove the positive, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you make a prediction, so when I've made predictions on YouTube, for example, I've often said, try to give people, look, we should all put our thoughts together and think something positive of this to help make things better, right? So I think when lots of people collectively think through YouTube, you might get you might get 240,000 hits on those sort of YouTube prediction things, because people like predictions. I think all those people are also trying to think something positive simultaneously, hopefully, if they connected to it, and just that very thoughts of things and change the future. So I think it helps, so even though we've seen something bad that's going to happen, but maybe we can change it slightly or make it less damaging than it might have been.
Yeah. How many members of your family share the same beliefs as you, but you don't really see them as beliefs?
Well, which family are we going to start with? Yours first, Jane?
Well, my mother seen things, because she said when I was a little girl there used to be an orange light following me everywhere. She only told me that a few years ago. Danielle's open-minded. The children, Willow's quite in tune with things. She sees things and gets feelings, she said, knowing, but we don't force anything on them. I mean, Celeste picks up telepathically.
Yeah, my daughter Celeste, she's very telepathic. We'll phone each other when we're trying to be phoning each other at the same time, even if we've not spoken for a long time. Yeah. There's that typical connection. I mean, in Jane's family, you had your grandmother was very mediumistic, so it's kind of gone down the family there. In my family, my grandmother was quite psychic and used to foresee things. She dreamed of my sister when she got married. She got really upset on the night of the marriage, saying, "Oh God, Viv, I dreamed you were getting married in black." She was getting married in black. And then soon after they got married, my sister Viv had the bad news that her husband had cancer and he died within no time. And going back in the family tree, when you start looking back in the family tree, in the Irish side of my family, my Nan O'Leary, she was always doing spiritualism and was interested in it all. So I don't think it's genetic though. In some, I don't think because I think it could just pop up in any family.
Yeah.
And although when we look deeper, we see that there were others that did it. And there's interest in spiritualism in the family with all my auntie and Conan Doyle and that. But I think it's something. I think we're born with it, all of us that have the mediumistic gift or the spiritual inclination, whatever it might be, or the healing gift, because we've done work in past lives. It has to come from somewhere. And unlike a lot of spiritualists, I believe that we have past lives, and that's where we've learnt it. It's come from that.
I mean, what would you like to be known in a past life if you could control it?
I don't know, because it's weird. It's just like, are we animals in a past life? Are we human? Are we always human? It's really... Well,
past lives are interesting. That's a good question, actually. From what I've looked at the Nadi oracles, we go through what the ancient Greeks would have called metempsychosis, that you go up through the animal kingdom, and that human birth is very rare. And according to Yogananda, who was a really great teacher, and others as well, they've said that not only do we incarnate in human form, which is one of the highest forms, we sometimes incarnate on other planets. But most of the time we will keep to the species that we're used to. So most of our incarnations will be human. But we may, for certain reasons, need to be in a highly advanced spiritual state. We might incarnate in another planet, or we might have to go down a step perhaps in another planet. but the human form is considered as the highest, one of the highest in the universe. But who knows? These are things people say. Can't prove it yet, but it seems to be hinted at if you believe some of the stuff that, you know, when you read something about your own life in the Nadis, for example, and it's so 100%, I think, well, all the rest must be true too. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a big one.
Do you believe in aliens?
I don't know. I definitely believe there's other planets like ours, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
The problem is we can get wacky with it, can't we? Because we can get so carried away with fantasy, and that's what happens. I mean, now it's become cool to become a medium. Everybody jumps on board, and they all start channeling stuff, for example, and they channel aliens and all sorts of things, and they can't give the proof. They can't give a proof about your grandmother's name was Mary and she came from Gosport and she did this and she did that. You know, they don't get that evidence that we used to do in Circle, didn't we? We always had to give the proof, the evidence to prove that we had the spirit communicator. So this is always the problem, and I think to separate the myths and misconceptions that people have, I think a medium and a trance medium and any sort of information that we're supposedly saying this is the way the universe is has to be backed up by proof. Mediums have to give proof.
Anything else you want to ask?
No, I
Are
think
you
that's
satisfied with
everything,
that?
Yeah, we covered it all. Okay, but that's quite interesting. So, as a young person, what do you think about all these? So, are you going to continue your interest in these type of things?
I think I will, because I've grown up around it. It's all I've known, but I'm really open-minded to everything about it. So yeah, I think I probably will carry on.
Yeah, and what do your friends think about it all now?
Yeah, my friends, they like it. They find it cool, weird, but they're like, ooh, I don't understand that, but it's new.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Different generation having a completely new viewpoint of it. Yeah.
So if I asked you, do you believe in life after death, what would you say?
Definitely. We've been given proof and evidence time and time again, and you can't debunk it.
I don't believe in life after death. I know there's life after death. And I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to find out and, continue your spiritual quest, and you'll know for certain that there's life after death. Anyway, thanks ever so much for doing this today.
Nice meeting you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they were fantastic
Enjoyed it.
questions.
Yeah.
I mean, you really put some thought into that, and I think the viewers who've been watching this today will really enjoy that. I think that's interesting stuff.
And we wish you every success in the future for
Thank you
you.
so much.
And thanks for sharing this fantastic set for us,
Thank you,
Kristy, your
Kristy.
lovely restaurant. And I hope people come and visit it. And we'll be coming along here for Sunday lunch sometime, I think.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to have you.
Thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
That's a wrap.
Oh, thank you so much,
Thank
Kristy,
you.
for doing that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I think it was a bit of fun and interesting for younger viewers particularly. And don't forget, this channel, subscribe to it. Hit that little bell thing and you'll get updates every week. We do new stuff all the time. So if you want to find out more about life after death, also have a look at our website at psychics.co.uk. Bye for now.
Bye.